Hello, everyone. Dr. Mad here. Let's get mad about A Christmas Carol. So, we are now at Stave 3, Chapter 3, the second of the three spirits. Awaking in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of one. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time, for the especial purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. But finding that he turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of his curtains this new spectre would draw back, he put them every one aside with his own hands, and lying down again, established sharp lookout all round the bed, for he wished to challenge the spirit on the moment of its appearance, and did not wish to be taken by surprise and made nervous. Okay, so he wakes up. So prodigious means huge, in the middle of a huge snore, and he sits up in bed to get his thoughts together. These few words here are a bit confusing, but it just means that he's not quite sure what the time is yet, whether it's 1 o'clock or not, but you don't need to worry too much about that. And then he feels that he's been woken up just in time to talk to the second spirit, which has been sent to him. So dispatched means sent through Jacob Marley's intervention. But then, as he thinks about which of his curtains the new spirit will draw back, he pulls back the curtains himself. Okay. Sometimes we want to do that, don't we? We prefer to do something ourselves, even if it's bad, rather than somebody else do it for us. And then he lies down again and keeps a sharp lookout for the visitor because he wants to challenge the spirit as soon as it appears. He doesn't want to be taken by surprise. And that again, that makes sense, doesn't it? Gentlemen of the free and easy sort, who plume themselves on being acquainted with a move or two, and being usually equal to the time of day, express the wide range of their capacity for adventure by observing that they are good for anything from pitch and toss to manslaughter, between which opposite extremes, no doubt, there lies a tolerably wide and comprehensive range of subjects. Without venturing for Scrooge quite as hardily as this, I don't mind calling on you to believe that he was ready for a good broad field of strange appearances, at, and that nothing between a baby and rhinoceros would have astonished him very much. So, what this means is this is the narrator speaking, saying that gentlemen or people in general, easygoing people, plumes are the feathers on birds, but it can also mean to show off. So these kind of people, they kind of present themselves with a move or two. They're just saying that they're easygoing and ready for anything. Okay, this is just Dickens' poetic way of of describing various people, and that these people say that, oh, they're ready for anything from pitch and toss to manslaughter. So pitch and toss is a little game where you throw coins or something against a wall, and whoever gets it nearest the wall wins. And then manslaughter is like murder, but just one step below murder. And he's saying that between these two extremes, there are obviously many types of people. So most people fit between these two extremes. And then without venturing, so here he's saying that he's not saying that Scrooge was the kind of person who could do anything between these two extremes. But in this case, he's saying that Scrooge was ready for anything. So when the second spirit appears, he's ready for anything because obviously the first spirit was so unusual. And Dickens is saying that anything between a baby or a rhinoceros would not have astonished him, would not have surprised Scrooge. Now, being prepared for almost anything, He was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck one and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, the very core and centre of a blaze of ruddy light, which streamed upon it when the clock proclaimed the hour, and which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant or would be at, and was sometimes apprehensive that he might be at that very moment an interesting case of spontaneous combustion without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think, as you or I would have thought at first, for it is always the person not in the predicament who knows what ought to have been done in it, and would unquestionably have done it too. At last, I say, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. Okay, so on the one hand, he's prepared for anything, but he's not prepared for nothing. Okay, he's expecting something to happen. So when the bell strikes one and nothing happens, he starts to tremble. So 5, 10, 15 minutes go by and nothing happens. But all this time, as he's lying there, there's a huge blaze of red light, bright red light, which is which started when the clock struck one. So although the ghost didn't appear, this red light appeared. And even though it was only light, he found it more alarming than a dozen ghosts. Okay, this is a like a simile, because he didn't know what it meant or where it came from. And apprehensive means fearful, and he's fearful that he might be a case of spontaneous combustion. So spontaneous means something that just suddenly happens. Combustion means burning. So this is when things catch fire for no reason. Now, it can be anything, and usually to do with the temperature reaching a certain level. There have been cases where human beings have thought, where it's happened, where people think that this has happened to human beings, and we actually still don't know what, how, or why this happens. But most scientists now believe that it doesn't really happen. There's usually some kind of an external reason. Maybe somebody left a cigarette smoking or something, so some kind of external thing that made the person burn. It wasn't really the person that spontaneously combusted. Anyway, that's just a little bit of side knowledge there for you. So he's thinking that he's become the subject of spontaneous human combustion without realizing it, without knowing it, and without kind of feeling it. But then, as he's sitting there, he begins to think. He thinks of something which he's saying that anybody else would have thought of straight away if they weren't in a. So predicament means a difficult situation. So because he's in this situation, he can't think straight. But anybody else would think, oh, this light must be coming from somewhere, right? So he suddenly starts to realize that the light is coming from the adjoining room, the next room. From whence, from where? So this is an old version of where. As he kind of looks at it, he can see that it's coming from the next room. And so when he fully realizes this, he gets up, puts on his slippers, and goes to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. He obeyed. So as soon as he gets to the door, a strange voice calls out. Bade means to bid, to call, to, and he goes in. It was his own room. There was no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there. and such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney as that dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, or Marley's, or for many and many a winter season gone. Heaped up on the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, sucking pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red hot chestnuts, cherry cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense twelfth cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it high up, to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door. Okay, so definitely his own room, but it's changed completely. So transformation means to change completely, and it's hung with living green. So green things which are living. So like plants and so on, fruit maybe. Yeah. And grove, so it looks like a little grove. So grove is a small wood, and there are gleaming berries glistening. So glisten means to shine. And there's holly and ivy, and these things, the holly and the mistletoe and the ivy, are so shiny that they act like little mirrors, reflecting back the light that's in the room. And we'll see where the light is coming from in a minute. There's a mighty blaze in the fire, and petrification means to turn to stone, or it could mean literally or metaphorically. So if you're in complete fear and you can't move, that's called petrification. Or if by some chemical process something turns to stone, that's also petrification. Hearth is the fireplace. And remember that Scrooge or Marley, they never really used the fire. They didn't want to spend money on the wood. So it's been the hearth has been turned to stone, basically. So he's saying that fireplace hasn't seen such a fire for many, many years. And then on the floor, making a kind of throne. So throne is obviously what a king or a queen sits on. And we'll see that's where the second spirit is sitting on, actually. Well, all these things. Now, we know that Dickens likes lists, but this is like an extra long, humongous list here, full of food things, really. So turkeys, geese, game are wild animals or birds that are killed for eating. Poultry is chicken. Brawn is meat from the head of a cow or a pig. And there's all these other meats as well. So sucking pig means a baby pig. Wreath means an arrangement of sausages. So mince pies, all these things here, which I'm sure you know what they are. You don't need to know the meanings of all these words. I'm just telling you out of interest, just in case you are interested in learning words like I am and like I used to be when I was at school, believe it or not. So luscious means delicious or juicy. And then 12th cakes are fruit cakes that were eaten on the 12th day of Christmas, because in the old days, the 12th day of Christmas was actually the bigger day. Christmas only became more popular in the 19th century, largely, as I mentioned in the context video, a lot of that had to do with Dickens. Not just him, but he played a big role in it. Seething means bubbling, bowls of punch. So this is an alcoholic drink. And chamber means room, and dim. So with the delicious steam. So there's so much steam coming from the punch that it almost creates like a fog in the room. And then sitting on all this food, there's a jolly giant, glorious to see. And the giant is holding a torch. Okay, so this is where the light was coming from. Plenty's horn is a reference to Greek mythology, and basically it's a container of some sort in the shape of a horn, and inside there is usually lots of food and so on. Obviously, in this case, the food had been mentioned earlier and it's on the floor, but in this case, it's the torch which is in the shape of a horn. And sitting on top of that is the giant holding the torch on Scrooge as Scrooge comes peeping round the door. "Come in," exclaimed the ghost. "Come in and know me better, man." Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before this spirit. He was not the dogged Scrooge he had been, and though the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, he did not like to meet them. "I am the ghost of Christmas present," said the spirit. "Look upon me." Okay, so obviously this line's fairly straightforward. Timid means shy or a bit scared. Dogged means persistent, stubborn. And also already we can see that Scrooge has changed quite a bit, hasn't he? And although the spirit is kind, Scrooge doesn't want to look him in the eye. So this is the ghost of Christmas present. The last spirit was called the ghost of Christmas past. So you can see where Dickens is going with this. Scrooge reverently did so. He was clothed in one simple green robe or mantle bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be warded or concealed by any artifice. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free, free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanour, and its joyful air. Girded around its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. Okay, so reverently means to respect. It has connotations of holy, and the giant is wearing this simple green robe or mantle, which is just a like a cloak or something. Don't need to worry about that. And it's bordered with white fur. So garment means an item of clothing, and it's very loose on the ghost. Capacious means big. This word here, in the case of a man, means chest, basically. So his chest is bare, and to disdain means to refuse. He can't be bothered. This means to guard or protect. This means to hide. This means to trick. So in other words, he's wearing this robe, but his chest is bare because he can't be bothered to cover his chest up. Ample is another word for big, and so his feet are bare as well because and Scrooge can see them underneath the robe, and on his head didn't wear anything either except a holly arrangement. So wreath means arrangement, which also had some icicles on it. And the giant's hair is dark brown and curly, and it's long and free. Genial means jolly, so it's got a jolly face and sparkling eyes, cheery voice. So really, as it says here, a jolly giant. Unconstrained means unrestricted, not holding back. Demeanor is your behavior or how you hold yourself. And joyful again, so just repeating the fact that this second ghost is really, really jolly. Gird means to wrap around. So wrapped around its middle is a scabbard. So a scabbard is where you keep a sword, but in this case there wasn't any sword in it. So antique means old, very old, and ancient also means very old. And sheath is another word for similar to scabbard, a covering. And this scabbard is eaten up with rust, and there's no sword in it. "You have never seen the like of me before," exclaimed the spirit. "Never," Scrooge made answer to it. "Have never walked forth with the younger members of my family, meaning, for I am very young, my elder brothers born in these later years?" pursued the phantom. "I don't think I have," said Scrooge. "I am afraid I have not. Have you had many brothers, spirit?" "More than 1800," said the ghost. "A tremendous family to provide for," muttered Scrooge. The ghost of Christmas present rose. "Spirit," said Scrooge submissively, "conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it. Touch my robe." Okay, so this page is fairly straightforward. I mean, this we don't need to worry too much about this, and it's not entirely clear what this means, but it's just suggesting that obviously it's a supernatural thing. Otherwise, obviously, he couldn't have 1,800 brothers, right? Um, and this paragraph is important. So Scrooge said submissively. So that means to give in. And you can see he's changed completely. He's saying that last night I had to be forced to go, but today I want to go willingly, and I want to learn any lesson that you can teach me. And I want to profit from it. I want to gain and learn from it. So the giant says, touch my robe. Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast. Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, meat, pigs, sausages, oysters, pies, puddings, fruit, and punch all vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where, for the weather was severe, the people made a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music in scraping the snow from the pavement in front of their dwellings and from the tops of their houses, whence it was mad delight to the boys to see it come plumping down into the road below and splitting into artificial little snowstorms. So this paragraph is fairly straightforward. So obviously, so everything that was listed before, we don't need to go through all that again. It all vanishes. So does the room, the fire, the glow, the time of night or whatever, and suddenly they're standing in the street. We don't know exactly where yet, and the people are scraping the snow from the front of their houses and from the roofs, and the scraping noise that it makes is almost like a kind of music, which is not unpleasant. Okay, and the boys are enjoying watching the snow coming down from the roofs and making little kind of artificial little snowstorms as it comes down from the roofs. The house fronts looked black enough, and the windows blacker, contrasting with the smooth white sheet of snow upon the roofs, and with the dirtier snow upon the ground, which last deposit had been ploughed up in deep furrows by the heavy wheels of carts and wagons, furrows that crossed and recrossed each other hundreds of times, where the great streets branched off and made intricate channels hard to trace in the thick yellow mud and icy water. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a dingy mist, half thawed, half frozen, whose heavier particles descended in a shower of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had by one consent caught fire, and were blazing away to their dear hearts' content. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate of the town, and yet was there an air of cheerfulness abroad that the clearest summer air and brightest summer sun might have endeavoured to diffuse in vain. Okay, so this paragraph is a bit more tricky. Don't need to worry too much about it. Dickens is just describing the scene really, and then he's making a point at the end of this paragraph, which is the point of it, which we'll get to in a minute. So the fronts of the houses are black, and the windows are black, in other words, dirty, which contrasts with the white snow on the roofs. Okay, and but also with the snow on the ground, which is a little bit dirtier, and that the snow on the ground has obviously as the carts go back and forth, they make furrows. So plow is like the machine that you get on a farm, right? But here the carts are making these ridges, um, these trenches, okay, by the carts, and these trenches are crossing and recrossing where all the roads are leading off and making intricate channels. Intricate means complicated, and you can't really trace them where they're all coming and going because of the yellow mud and icy water. So, like I say, you don't need to worry too much. It's just painting a picture of this scene, which is a bit dirty actually. And that's the point, as you'll see in a minute. So the sky was gloomy, and There's a dingy mist, a dirty mist. Thaw means melted, so half melted, half frozen. And some of the heavy particles are coming down, sooty atoms. So soot is the thing, the black stuff that's made when you burn something. And here, Dickens is using a simile and kind of exaggeration. It says, oh, all the chimneys in the country have caught fire all at the same time, and they're burning away and creating all this soot. So he's saying there was nothing very cheerful. So when the way he describes it, there's nothing very cheerful. And yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad, meaning not a foreign country here. It's just saying that there is an air of cheerfulness in the atmosphere in this place, which even summer air and summer sun would not be able to cover up or spread out or to reduce. So why do you think that is? And the answer is that it's because it's Christmas. Okay? That's where the cheerfulness is coming from, despite the fact that the surroundings themselves are actually quite dingy and dirty. 4. The people who were shoveling away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another from the parapets and now and then exchanging a facetious snowball, better natured missile far than many a wordy jest, laughing heartily if it went right, and not less heartily if it went wrong. The poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruiterers were radiant in their glory. There were great, round, pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts, shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen, lolling at the doors and tumbling out into the street in their apoplectic opulence. There were ruddy, brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish onions, shining in the fatness of their growth like Spanish friars, and winking from their shelves in wanton slyness at the girls as they went by, and glanced demurely at the hung-up mistletoe. There were pears and apples clustered high in blooming pyramids. There were bunches of grapes made in the shopkeeper's benevolence to dangle from conspicuous hooks that people's mouths might water gratis as they passed. There were piles of filberts, mossy and brown, recalling in their fragrance ancient walks among the woods and pleasant shufflings ankle deep through withered leaves. There were Norfolk biffins, squat and swarthy, setting off the yellow of the oranges and lemons, and in the great compactness of their juicy persons, urgently entreating and beseeching to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. The very gold and silver fish set forth among these choice fruits in a bowl, though members of a dull and stagnant-blooded race, appeared to know that there was something going on, and to a fish went gasping round and round their little world in slow and passionless excitement. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to explain this paragraph in this video because it will become too long. Instead, I'm going to explain it in the next video and I'll read it again there as well. So for now, I'll just do this bit as always. Please do subscribe and tell all your friends if you found this video useful. And I will see you in the next video where I will explain that paragraph and we'll carry on with Stave 3.